And welcome back to another episode of On Coaching with Magness and Marcus. I'm Steve Magness, the cross-country coach at the University of Houston, author of the new book, The Passion Paradox, joined by my good friend, colleague, John Marcus, the director of High Performance West. John, how are you?
Oh, you know me, I'm doing incredible. I'm here to give the people what they want. And what they want and what they need is that book, The Passion Paradox. If you haven't read it, why? It's so good.
That is right. John was actually one of our first readers to make sure that the book didn't suck and to guide us in the right direction. So
yes, and all the parts that suck, they cut. So it's great. So they listened. Good job.
One of these episodes will have to do a behind the scenes episode on writing a book, because that is what it is, right? It's a process of cutting, right? You put all this information out there, and then you hopefully yourself, and then have good friends and discerning readers who get rid of the stuff that doesn't work, and by the end, hopefully you're left with the good stuff.
Right, and this is why The Passion Paradox is a great book, because it's crisp, it's short. Every page is new, useful information. There are a lot of books out there. Take it from the guy who's read 55 books since the start of 2019. These books can really just be blog posts or an article or an essay. And Steve does a good job, and so does Brad, his co-author, of putting articles and essays out there. It should be articles and essays, but then creating a cohesive, practical, useful narrative to be able that's worth being a book. And this book is worth being a book. So I just don't support it because my name's in the back of the book. I support it because there's a lot of good stuff, and I've had several coaches I've recommended to reading it who have completed it and said, wow, game changer. So pick it up, dive into it. It's worth it. Even if you listen to this podcast 2-3 years from 2019 and you haven't read it, do it now, because it's one of those books you're going to read and be like, why didn't I read this sooner?
Yes, exactly. And also supporting stuff that both John and I put out helps keep this free podcast going, which is always a cool thing, and we want to keep doing this. So anyway, what we're going to talk about this week is a continuation of our last podcast, which if you haven't listened to it, what are you doing? Go back, listen to that. But you can listen to this one as well, even if you didn't listen to the last one. But what we're going to talk about is how to crawl out of the burnout hole.
And it's a deep hole.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
It is, especially if you're a pusher, like most of our listeners are, like most of runners are. We're very good at getting into the burnout hole. And very good at ignoring ourselves digging that hole. But the hard part comes when we get to the bottom of that hole and look up and are like, how in the world do we get out of this?
Yes, it is. Having been there, it is a tough elephant to eat, and the cliches, are around because they're true, right? And it's like anything else, you just have to one chunk at a time figure out systematically. At least this is my process when I got in the burnout hole, was to say, how did I get here? And just do a very deep, reflection, and then have a long cathartic process of being like, okay, I got here. How did I get here? Because I didn't want to get here. That wasn't the destination. That wasn't the goal. And I don't like being here because it sucks on a lot of different levels. And what's one thing I can start doing right now, today, taking action, that can help me crawl out of this, get some forward momentum back to health and sustainability? And I think that's where you have to do, personal inventory and say, what's the smallest possible action you can take right now to get out of the hole?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, because a lot of times when you're in the burnout kind of hole, that small action is really difficult to do, right?
Yes.
When you're completely shot and fried, even easy stuff becomes difficult to do.
Yeah, I mean, the total apathy, and it's crushing. I mean, I didn't want to get out of bed, or, all I was doing was eating junk food and watching movies. And like, I mean, Steve would be like, "Hey, can you do this?" Like, yeah, I'll get to it. No, not happening today. And it's not because of a lack of industry. It's just a lack of, like, the chemicals are off in a lot of reasons, a lot of ways. And you physically don't have the mojo to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and this is one of the places where I think societal norms have kind of held us back because we have this idea or concept that um, if we feel apathetic, if we're not motivated, then it's our fault for not being like tough enough or not having enough, um, drive or
Right.
willpower to do it. But in a lot of cases, like that's not the case at all. Like I think it's similar to if you're in the marathon and you bonk and you might have all the reason, will, drive to make it to the end of the race, but there's nothing your body can do. um I think sometimes we separate this like physical and psychological to too high of a degree, and that they're very similar things. I mean, if you look at all from overtraining to burnout to depression, like, no, they're not all the same, but they have similar underlying chemical imbalances and reasons, chemical sharing that occur. So it's very similar, and I think that's where we do a disservice in saying, oh, like, you just feel apathetic or you don't feel motivated. Like, why aren't you willing your way out of this?
Yeah, it's weird. We blame the agent, right? We blame the person who's not being industrious and not taking action, as if they are now like an invalid. And I think it's interesting because I had a lot of people around me who are well intended take that posture of like, oh, kind of white glove treatment. I don't know how to interact with you. Hey, just go get help. Just go see someone. Like, very well intended advice, but it's not just like, oh yeah, let me go. I'm hungry and it's lunchtime and I need to go eat something. I go to Subway and get a sandwich. It's not that easy of a transaction by any means, because what it requires is, it's kind of like anything where it's a transformable um, pivot or a transformable rebound. Alcoholics Anonymous, I mean, they have a support group, they have steps, they have a whole infrastructure set in place to graduate people through this process. And so this is not just a simple, one-time transaction. Take the blue pill and you're fine. You got in the hole through a series of cascading and snowballing actions that led you down into it, and vice versa. The only way to get out is through another series of virtuous, right, instead of vicious, cascading actions and sequence of actions that get you out of it.
Yeah, you know, the other thing that you mentioned at the very get go here is this almost like post mortem. How did I get here? Um, in a lot of ways, I think we have to treat this burnout phenomena similar to how we would treat an injury, right? Or even overtraining in running.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to sit back and say, okay, like, obviously somewhere along this line we went off the tracks, right? There's always some sort of cause to why your body broke down, just as the way, maybe your body and mind and psychology and all that way broke down with this burnout phenomenon. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, at some point you have to do the due diligence of figuring out, okay, why did I go off the track? And then, like, how do I make that better for next time, so that, like, I don't fall back in this hole? Because a lot of times what happens is people feel burnout. They say, oh gosh, this is horrible, I'm going to get out of this. They get out of it, right? They
Right.
figure out how to climb out of the hole. And then, like, they walk 5 feet to the right and then start digging a new hole. and, and,
Yes.
then, and then a year or two later, like, they find themselves in the same spot, maybe even an entirely different area, right? I've had friends who have been like, oh, this job is killing me, I'm going to do something else. Like, they go to another job and they take the same tactics and everything towards it, and then, they realize eventually, like, it's not the job, it's how I was, like, approaching it.
No, it's you. It totally is 100% you, because I know very few people are like, well, I have this job I don't like, but I'm gonna go take a shittier job that I like less, and then I'm gonna get burned out again. Most people, when they take a job, it's a moment of possibility and excitement and enthusiasm, right? So you were excited to take this job in the first place. What happened in 6 months or a year that now made this job this ogre that has caused you to have burnout? It's nothing with the position, the role, the demands on it. It's all 100% you. And to me, I think it's that fundamental, full ownership that you are the primary agent in your life and you need to know thyself, right? And know you. And we typically, as humans, are creatures of patterns and cycles. And so if you're having a sequence of patterns where it's like, ups and downs, peaks and valleys, that's not bipolar necessarily. What it is like you realizing you just didn't figure out the correct triggers to stay away from. The diet fails in the grocery store when you buy the Oreos. Sobriety fails when you step a foot into the bar. There's nothing else to do in the bar but drink. So it's easy. It's this environmental setup that matters the most. And our environment shapes us. It's amazing the empowering impact of even your home environment, your car environment, the little microenvironments that you subject yourself to every day, that shapes us. And for me, it was a understanding of the action I started to take was moving more towards minimalism or tidying up, getting rid of all clutter, like really just making a break with a lot of stuff. And like I counted up, I have over 1,000 books in my house, 1,000 like physical paper books, and they're 250 on the Kindle, right? So that's a lot of space. And then I also have all these clothes from all these places I've worked, because when you are a coach, you get a lot of clothes because you don't get money, but you get lots of clothes, right? Because you get a sponsorship or whatever, or from the university if you're in that setting, or you get free product, blah, blah, blah. And it's awesome at the time, but eventually it takes up space. And what we know about minimalism, and one of the books that I read that was really helpful and really simple, really straightforward, and just kind of catalyzed me was Goodbye, Things by a Japanese guy. And they're like extreme minimalists, like get rid of everything but like 10 objects type guys. But taking those principles, it was like, get rid of the stuff that's weighing you down. Get rid of the stuff that you haven't used in a long time. And we have this kind of hangover from the Great Depression, golden era generation where, well, I might use it maybe sometime in the future, so I better hang on to it. That's BS now. Like we live in the world of abundance. We don't need to hoard physical photos or documents or anything anymore. Take a picture of it, scan it, keep it on Evernote or your iCloud or whatever, but alleviate the clutter in your space. And that for me was very empowering. And then I started to alleviate the clutter on my body, right? And so it started with my physical environment that I was in day to day, but then it was also about the physical environment that I was in my body. So, there's a great book that I think is brilliant. It's called Squat Every Day. And, I read it 3 times now. I reread it and I just said, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to squat every single day. And it's just like running, right? Some days are heavy. Some days are light. Some days are intervals. Some days are this, but just front squat every single day. And that to me, it was one of the very first acts I did in the morning. And it just set myself up with a trigger, said, today I'm going to take care of my body. Today I'm going to do right by my physicality. And if I squatted, there was a lot less possibility that I was going to, eat processed junk food, have an extra beer or two, have too many cookies or treats. And that action reoriented me about, okay, let's get to a physical space where I'm respecting myself by putting the work in. And lo and behold, it slimmed me up, burned me up, got me to a place where I could do what I want to do, which is run again, and just create a virtuous cycle that really catapulted me out of the deep hole.
Yeah, I think the environment aspect of it is highly, highly underrated. Because there's a well-known field of psychology called ecological psychology, which essentially says that environment invites action, right? So
yes. Mm-hmm.
if you have, the classic example I like to use, and I'm guilty of it too, is if you walk into the center of any modern house, what sits in the middle of, like, what's it all centered around? And
The TV.
TV, right?
Yeah.
Like the TV,
Oh.
which has the couch and then chairs around it and stuff like that. Everything's centered at that, so your focus and attention goes there. So your most likely thing to do when you're maybe short on willpower or come home from a long day of work is to plop down in front of it, because that's what your environment is inviting you to do. It's no different than if you leave your running shoes and a pair of shorts in the car as you drive home, like, you're more likely to stop and, like, get a run in versus get home and then, like, try and find your running shoes somewhere where they're hidden and all that stuff. Like, ease of environment helps. And I think, well, that's such a simple thing that often it's lost. And when you're in this depths of this burnout phase, like, the simpler you can make things, the less decisions you have to make, the better. And that's why I do like that idea of minimalism that you mentioned, and not only in terms of things or stuff, but also in terms of actions and schedules and to-do lists, right? Is like simplify, simplify, simplify. Don't worry, in the running context, don't worry about getting fit for and what you're going to race 5 months from now. Worry about, like, what you're able to do and getting out the door right now, right? Athletes that I've had who have gone through burnout, myself included, like, we'd go with zero schedule and be like, just get out the door. Once you're right out the door, like, you'll figure it out. And if you feel like going long, go long. If you feel like going for a jog around the block or going for a walk, then do that. Like, it doesn't matter, right? But if you can get that routine back, then we can worry about things. But don't complicate it. Keep it simple.
Yeah, quick aside on that. When Daniel Herrera broke the Mexican national record in the mile a couple of years back, at 3:56, I coached him day to day. It was a text message every single day. Here's how you doing? Checking in, getting a daily pulse. Okay, here's what we're doing today. There was no grandiose plan written down, like, you're going to break 4, you're going to do this. It was actually what I call adaptive coaching. It was moment to moment. What does this person need right now to be able to elevate and compete at the level that he has desired to compete? And I tell people this all the time. Like, I'm agnostic about how we get to the destination, but the destination must be hyper clear. It must be like, we're going to this street. You just say, hey, take me to Steve's house in Houston. Like, I have the address. I know the streets. I go, I'm going to Steve's house in Houston. Now, how I get there, maybe there's traffic. Maybe there's a detour. Maybe there's flooding. Those things will happen, but you need to know where you want to end up. And I think that's also true with detailing and organizing and designing a life, is like, where do you really want to end up in 10, 20, 30 years? Not specifically like, as a child would say, oh, I want to have a big house and money in the bank and all these things. Like, do I want to be fit, or do I want to be overweight and stressed out? Do I want to have this role, or do I, but at the compromise of it, have hypertension because I'm always stressed out in this role? Like, you only get one life to live, and it's not worth living the one life you have and the few breaths you have on this planet playing the, like, who has the better role game, or who has the better salary game, or who has the more prestige position game. Like, I'm sorry, at the end of the day, that's going to knock on the door and everyone's done. It doesn't matter your role, your salary, or whatever, but you are in control of you. And that's what I realized, is like, me first. And it's tough as a coach who's a giver by nature, and you are there, or as like, even, or a parent, or anyone who's in a giving profession. Your competency is measured, and your ability is directly wedded to other people's actions and achievements. So you, of course, want to provide as much as possible at the drop of a hat. And it's well intended. But the reality is, if you're not right, nothing that you do is right. The quality is compromised every single step of the way. And so that was another realization I had, me first. So now I don't even look at my text messages, until like 9 a.m. Like, I don't care if you're freaking out. You know what? You're a grown person. You can deal with it. At a certain time, I don't even, look at text messages or any kind of correspondence, electronic correspondence after a certain hour. And Eric Hines taught me that, who preceded Mike Smith at NAU. He's like, at 5:30, I stopped interacting with my cell phone, because he needed to be home and be with his family, not just be the head track coach at NAU, because it was bleeding him dry. And that's what I mean. People are vampires. If you let them, they will bleed you dry, not maliciously, but because you're saying it's okay to interrupt me at any time. It's okay. I'll get back to you instantly with a text message. And I ask myself all the time, right? Is this important, or is this urgent / interesting? Important matters are matters that must be dealt with at this moment. Urgents are little freakouts or hangnails, or interesting is like, oh, that's kind of cool. That stuff can all be backloaded. That stuff can all be dealt with later. But you have to be super strict, I think, or at least that's worked for me, about when you do things and when you don't do things. And it's making a daily schedule when, like, I do things here and I do things there, and that's it. That, to me, like, inspired by Winston Churchill, his daily regime was amazing. And it was just so clarifying, and he got so much done because at certain rhythms in his day, when he knew when he was at his best, he did those actions. And so he wasn't paralyzed by thought or by fear or by procrastination. He's like, hey, I got an hour to do this, and this is why I do this, because if I don't do it this hour, I'm not doing it because I got other stuff on the docket. And it was awesome.
Yeah, it makes me think to a conversation I had last week with a fellow college coach, Shayla Houlihan. And we were talking about how
Who's a great coach, by the way. I love her so much, Shayla. If you're listening, you're awesome.
There you go. Shout out to Shayla. But like, we all got into the college coaching thing at around the same time. So she's kind of our peer group. And we were talking a little bit of how our mindset has evolved and how things have shifted. And we got to talking about how important it is to, like, take time for yourself and to prioritize, like, just living and taking care of daily living stuff, especially in the sense that if you're gone for, let's say, like this weekend for me, for Texas Relays, for 3 days, you're away, then maybe Wednesday afternoon before we leave, like, I got to leave the office early, go home, do laundry, take care of myself, like, get in a run, whatever it is for me, because, like, I'm going to be gone all week, or all weekend. And it's like giving yourself that permission versus sitting there thinking, like, okay, like, no, I have to, be at this place at this time and do this at this time. Because it's really tough to do, and coaching isn't this 9-to-5 job. You work a lot of weekends, you give back a lot, you're up at 6 a.m. doing stuff, so you've got to make sure to almost like plan in like you time to make sure that you don't burn out and can handle that. And actually, I was reading an article, I think it was the Stanford swim coach, who says that one day a week, his team, when his team has like an easy practice, he leaves it up to his assistant, goes off and goes golfing. And then another week or another day, he tells his assistant to do the same and leave and like go do something for you, and you can miss practice. Because like he's sending the message that, hey, like this is really difficult work for you athletes, but it's also really difficult work for me. And if I need to stay in this for the long game, like I've got to do something to like take down that stress, give me some sort of sense of well-being, and can't be the coach that sleeps in his office, which I think is a fantastic message to send.
Yeah, if you're sleeping in your office, you're doing it wrong, and I think we prioritize that like Protestant work ethic, like 18, 20 hours, like, or the Silicon Valley, like 100-hour work weeks, Wall Street, whatever. No, you're dumb. I'm sorry, period, end of story. It just, you need to hire more help. You need to, create boundaries. You need to not do that. Like, because the most important resource is the human resource, the human being, the person. Like, you can't, you push yourself to ad nauseum and get in the seesaw of burnout and recovery, because at a certain point, your body will say, hey, look, I warned you a lot of times. Now I'm done. And then what? Right? And then what? And what's it for? Like, to say you won some title, to say some athlete that, really wasn't into it, you kind of cajoled into being a champion. What about next season? What about the season after that, right? It's finding that sustainable practice. And I think there's a lot to be said for rituals. In the great book, Creative Habit by the dancer, Twyla Tharp, I think her name is, she talks about ritualizations. And for her ritual, because she's a dancer and she's in her late 60s, but she's a teacher, choreographer, she still needs to show like the moves to the dancers and the troops that she teaches, is she gets up every morning at 5:30. She lives in New York City. She gets on her gym clothes. She goes downstairs. She hails a cab. She gets in the cab and she goes and works out and strengthens and keeps her body in peak physical condition for 2 hours every day. And she says, the ritual's completed. It's finished when I'm in the cab. And that's brilliant because for her, she's in the cab. No one wants to get up and work out at 5:30 every day. She's like, I have days I start this thing, I don't want to do this. It's cold, or I'm hungover, whatever. I didn't have a good night's sleep. But she just goes through, she's automated the ritual, so there's no thought. It's completely subconscious. She just goes, puts on the clothes, and gets in. And once she gets in the cab, it's like her little reward. You did a good thing. Because most times when you go to the gym, you're happy you went to the gym. And you're happy that you've been going to the gym for years and years and years and years. And I think there's a lot to be said with that ritual. Like for me, it was developing and sustaining the ritual of, reading and coffee from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and no interruptions, nothing, and that is for me, helps put me off on the right foot. And then after that, I go and work out, where it's squatting, going to the gym, or going for a run, or squatting, going for a run, whatever it is. So I have 3 hours in the morning before I even start my day, 5 a.m. to 8:30, where it's all about me. And you might not say, oh, I can't live that life. That's fine. Find the restorative time that you need in a day or in a week or in maybe in 2 weeks, and then get the reps in, get the time in. And if you need 2 hours a day to feel like, man, I'm taking care of me, I'm on point, or you need 10 hours in a week, schedule that restorative time in and keep it sacred, keep it super sacred. And you might not be able to do it every single day at the same time, but schedule it. Say, oh, hey, I can't meet with you now because I got an appointment at 2. And they're like, what's the appointment? Oh, it's an important appointment. Can't break it. If it's you going out for a walk or a run or reading, don't break that appointment with yourself. Because if you do, what you're saying, the signal is you actually lack integrity. If you told yourself you were going to do something for you and then you break it, how can anyone else trust you in the long run to follow up on something? And I think, we have to be disciplined with those habits. Otherwise, we backslide into just the, spiraling out of control. And I've learned this, and because I've seesawed a little bit too, and it finally just came to a head, and I was like, no, never again. Because when you go down to that deep dark hole, and you've been there, it is an inflection point. Andrew Wheaton calls it rock bottom, and he's hit rock bottom, and he moved to Portland, and I helped nurse him out of the rock bottom, and was just there after he retired. And he's really beat up because he lost, like most athletes do. I mean, he's a 2-time Olympian. I mean, he lost his sense of identity. He's like, I've been this amazing, fast, expected to be runner guy, the 1500 meter guy for America for however long, and now I have to figure out how to reinvent myself, and that's a heavy burden. And he spiraled down. He's bounced back, and it's been awesome to see. He's reinventing himself, and it's great. But don't minimize the importance of the ritual and the importance of the time for you. If you're a giver, everyone around you's taking because you're in that giver role. But you need to give to yourself, and that means you need to take a little time for yourself too.
Yeah, and I think that it's this tough juxtaposition, right? Where if you're a giver, you almost gain energy from giving and providing to others. But at the same time, if it goes overboard, it's like anything. Like it's too much, it starts taking away. And I think that's where it's really, really important on having that hard conversation with yourself and figuring out where that is. Early on in my coaching, I was like, oh, I'll coach whoever, like I'll help whoever, like, you know,
Yes.
and like
Uh-huh.
the sentiment is great. And like I really enjoy that in theory, but over time you have to realize, well, there's only so much space and time that I have, that this is going to take away from people if I keep doing this freely. So it's really coming to the point where you say, okay, like how many, if my goal is to help people, like how many can I actually help? Right? And
Right.
what does that bandwidth look like? How much bandwidth do I have? I mean, I have to ask this question all the time because I juggle a million different things like John does. Is, you know, if I want to write, which I do, like where do I give that like importance? How much time do I commit to that? Where does it fall into play? You know, does it
Can you
take?
talk about real quick tangent on your writing, Steve, with the
Sure.
stopwatch? Talk about that discipline of your stopwatch and writing.
Yeah, so that's something, again, I'm always looking at different ways to kind of keep me on track and pay and give me, it's more than like keeping me on track, it's giving awareness to what I'm doing, right? Because I've really been trying to focus on being intentful on the practices that I'm doing. So what I do is when I sit down to write, I treat it just like I would a workout, right? Because that's something very similar to me. So I'll start my watch, right? When I sit down to
Mm-hmm.
write, start my watch, take my split. And then if I start, you know, maybe someone calls, like I split my watch. So that time doesn't count. Like that's my recovery interval essentially. If I
Yeah.
find myself like, you know, most of the time I write with my internet off, but if I have it on and I start going through emails, like split my watch, stop. And like that just brings it home to where I'm treating it like, okay, it's all right if I have some of these rest periods every once in a while, but it's just like a workout. Like when I'm in the workout, like I'm trying to get in the good hard work. Like that's the
Yes.
point. So like, you know, a rest period to get up and, you know, walk around the room or like go grab some coffee or a drink or whatever. Like that's fine, but like then I got to get back to doing the workout. And you know what I did this for a while is like I'll try and like track my intentional time spent on writing to see how much quality I'm getting in, and it just kind of keeps me accountable as well. But the most important thing is like it puts intent, and you know, as you know, John, like I like to do most of my writing at coffee shops, or I have
Mm-hmm.
a little small room in my house, which I can just close the door and it's super small and it's just me in there, um, which I
That's a
get.
great room, by the way. I love it. I've worked in that room. It's a
Yeah.
great room.
So like, but I'm intentional on it. Like I
Yeah.
don't do very good. I like if I try, I can't write on my couch or sitting at my kitchen table. It doesn't work very well. So it's being a little ritualistic, and in terms
Yes.
of balancing it with my coaching too, is I'm very intentional on carving out time when I know that okay, like during for instance, you know, we have one morning a week where we're on our own, right, to give the kids a break
Mm-hmm.
from waking up, and it's always an easy run. So generally those mornings I'm like, okay, I don't have practice, so I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to the coffee shop for 3 hours, and this is going to be my writing time, and then I'll go into, you know, work and start, you know, handling the stuff and coaching that I don't like, the paperwork. But um it's like being intentional on setting aside that time of when I'm supposed to be doing things.
What has like when you started that practice to now, like what transformations or how's it changed you?
Yeah, I think the timing in journal has made me more focused on what I'm doing. Like I'm getting
Mm.
more quality out of it. So what I've noticed just as a basic, you know, trend in my own writing history is when I was younger, like I could sit down and just crank something out for hours upon hours upon hours, no different than I could in running. Um, but over time, like, you know, maybe it's being immersed in the modern internet social media age, and or maybe it's just growing older, like my mind drifts, my work ethic, I guess, efforts drift a little bit more. So I have to have these like reminders to stay engaged, no different than now if I go out for, if I was to go out for a workout, like it's a heck of a lot easier for me to say, okay, I'm going to do 8 quarters and then now get to 4 and be like, this kind of sucks. I'm going to step away.
Yeah.
So it's like that same thing happens in any avenue you pursue, any activity you do. So it's really about setting up my environment to make sure that, hey, if I'm going to try and get the most out of what I'm doing, that I'm like being intent on doing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's one of those things when Steve told me about it, I was like, man, he is smarter than I am. Gosh, that's so good. Because quantifying, your work, because we can fool ourselves like, oh yeah, I got a lot done today. Well, if you just answered like 400 emails, but you didn't make any, appreciable gains on the big project that has this deadline looming, like Steve has with articles he might publish or books he has to write, right? Well, you didn't really do anything. You fooled yourself. And that easy, simple, quantifiable, how much time did I really spend doing the craft, that matters. It's kind of why I don't care about mileage, right? It's not that, mileage, like just racking up as many mileage doesn't say anything, but how many hours have you spent running this week? And it kind of, to me, it encapsulates a little bit more crisply how much time you're really spending doing the art or doing the work or doing the practice, right? Versus saying, well, I got 70 miles in. Well, what does that really mean? It's kind of an abstract number. But if you only have so many hours in a day or a week, and you devoted 2 of those hours every day, whether in 1 session or 2 sessions or 3 sessions or whatever, to running or bettering and preparing your physical competitive physique, okay. And then we can say, hey, that was a good chunk of your life this week you've decided to fork over to getting better. And we can actually say that's good. And now we don't need to just grow it just to grow it. We can't say, oh, well, last week you ran 14 hours. This week you need to run 16 hours or else. Because we can get caught up in the wrong measures. And I feel like mileage sometimes is a wrong measure. Running 100-mile weeks, just run 100-mile weeks, doesn't accomplish anything. We're not competing against who can run the most miles in a week. We're competing against who can get to the finish line fastest. And who's to say that's a prerequisite is 100 miles a week? It's not. It's pretty arbitrary. But if you can say with confidence that, hey, I've done my craft with consistency for 3 months and done about 15 hours a week of my craft for 3 months, oh, wow, you're going to be pretty good. I don't care who you are. I don't care what craft you have, but it's just getting a better measure, I think, too. But that you're spot on, Steve, man. That environment design, that is a game changer. And it takes a lot of upfront work to design your environment. But once you've designed it, man, it's habitual. It's just a simple, I'm here, and only here do I do this. Another thing for me was just clearing my desk. That was a big thing. I read, I read a lot about creatives like advertisers or, just artists, different creatives that are not athletic-minded people. And one of the books by a famous ad man who actually met the Mad Men series, I guess there's a TV series called Mad Men that's based off of him, but I guess he's like, it's not me at all. His big thing is my desk at the end of the day is spotless. That's I leave it spotless and I come to a spotless desk. And as he's creating and designing and papers and things, yeah, they can get messy. But at the end of the day, the last thing he does is keep an absolutely clean desk. And you know what? I used to be very messy with my desk, lots of papers, lots of things in process, as I said, or like projects in process. And now it's like no more. I mean, it was a great inspiration and it's worked really well because now you have this clean desk and it's this virgin canvas every day. And like, what am I going to put on it? And what am I going to do? What am I going to spend? And I can focus on this. So if I read a book, I'm focusing on the book. If I'm doing something with the computer, like writing training for athletes or reflecting on my thoughts, it's just that. It's just the journal, a reflection journal. It's just the computer right training. That's it. And so what it does is it allows us to amplify what we're good at. And, men more than women are good at just focusing on one task because we're more linear thinkers. Women tend to be more lateral thinkers. Like my wife amazes me all the time. She can keep like 7 conflicting thoughts in her head concurrently. And she's like, why can't you? And I go, dude, I'm just a male. Like, and that's the reality is you have to also know how you're hardwired. And some people, this might not work, but it's worked brilliantly for me. And it's been very, very helpful. And part of the reason why I've been able to read, 50 plus books in less than 3 months. I mean, I tell people, like, I'm not special. I'm actually a very slow reader, but I just streamline the design of my environment. And I have certain periods of the day, the 2 hours in the morning once I wake up, and the 2 hours right before I go to bed, that I read 4 hours a day, every single day, however many weeks. Do the math. That creates a lot of time to read.
Yeah, I think part of it is that when we grow up as athletes, our structure is taken care of. Well, let me,
Yes.
and I think to a large degree, like the general population is like non-athletes are like that too, but even more so as an athlete, is, when I was in high school, like there were no questions. Like I didn't have to think of my structure because I knew, all right, Steve, like high school, I can walk, decades later, like I can walk you through it, right now, because it's like, okay, I'm going to get up. My alarm's going to go off. Like I'm going to get my running stuff on. I'm going to pack my bag. I'm going to go straight to school. I'm going to go run, my senior year, 6 miles, 6 to 7 miles around school, shower, go to class, right? And then you're in class until the afternoon, and it's practice in the afternoon. Then I'm going to come home. I'm going to be dead. I'm going to eat some dinner, do my homework, go to bed by 10 o'clock, There was just like this inbuilt structure where if I didn't set aside time where I was going to run or when I was going to do homework, like it wasn't going to get done. So like it was in there. And even, you get a little more flexibility in college, but it's very similar because it's like I have practice at these times. I have to get runs in at these times. I have to show up to class at these times. For the most part, and like, this is what it's going to be. So there's that structure. And I think sometimes when we get into, adulthood where we have more choices, is that structure kind of goes away if we don't have that typical maybe 9 to 5 job. Even if we have that 9 to 5 job, no one tells you what to do during that 9 to 5 job. Like you don't have separate classes every hour that you have to shift to. You just have 9 to 5 to get things done. So it's like that structure goes away, and I think sometimes that it leaves us on this like paradox of choice where too many choices leave us where we don't get anything done. And I've definitely had those days where I didn't have structure or I didn't have something where I was like, all right, I'm going to work on this, where I would, sit there and 2 hours go by and I'm like, wow, I tweeted and posted this, and that's it. And it's not because I didn't want to get things. It's just because like I didn't have the environmental structure around me. Now, as we're sitting here talking, like it might seem like we're being like, very strict on this, but John could tell you, like, my house is not very organized. There's papers all over the place. But there are certain periods of time where I know I'm working on this, or certain days, like Sunday is my schedule writing day. Like I write training schedules on Sunday.
Yep.
It's my religious experience.
Yeah, it really is. It's awesome to watch him at a coffee shop just cranking out training for like 3 hours. He's like at mass.
Exactly. But like that's the great example of this is going to get done at this time. And I'm kind of thrown off if I don't have my Sundays. So, so like that's it. Like it's find your thing, right? Find what works for you well. You might need a super clean desk, or you might need to be intentional on when you're sitting down to doing things and keeping track of things, or you might need to just set aside time to where I'm going to focus on this. And the reason we're talking about this in this burnout section is because burnout isn't just too much work, right? It's not.
No, it's definitely not. No,
it's not like, oh, I work too much. That's like saying, you got injured because you ran too much. Well, maybe, but there's a lot more details to that picture than I just ran too much, right? It's all these different loads and biomechanics and all that stuff. And the same comes with burnout. And I think that's where, why we're talking about so much on this is when you dug yourself out of that hole and you're figuring out, okay, how do I set my life up so that I don't do this? It's okay, there needs to be some intentional action on this. And then the other component, before I ramble off on the deep end on here, is that it's also satisfying your basic needs, right?
Right.
Which, one of those needs is like this community and belonging piece. And I think when a lot of people, when they enter this burnout and they maybe rearrange part of their life and say, I'm going to work less, what they don't consider is this community aspect that, again, we took for granted in athletics, especially in high school and college, where I think one of the reasons why it's harder to burn out in those phases is because, like, it's not just you're going on a run. In most cases, it's I'm going to shoot the shit for an hour with my best friends,
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
And that part, that community piece, like helps almost buffer you from this burnout. And as we reach adulthood, I think we need to spend more time figuring out how do we keep that ingrained and involved.
Well, it's having virtuous anchors throughout your day. And so some are relational anchors. Some are self-enhancement anchors. Some are duty anchors. And so it's a series of different anchors, right? And that's what I've learned. And I'll credit the Rock, Dwayne Johnson, to give me the language of anchors. Because his anchor is where no matter what his ritual is every day, he can travel the globe. He can travel halfway around the world. When he gets off a plane or when he first wakes up in the morning, whichever one happens, his thing is he goes, hits a couple shots of espresso, hits the weights. That's his anchor. And he goes, I need that anchor to let me go out and be in the world. And that's what the structure gives you as an anchor, right? So you have the relational anchor in high school if you're an athlete of practices also associating out with a peer group that you're really aligned with, working on a team sport or even in an independent sport like tennis or track on a common goal. So you have that anchor built in. You have these other anchors where it's like, okay, I'm going to study from these hours to these hours, or my duty is to be at class from these hours to these hours. My duty is to be at my job from these hours. Okay, so you feel that duty industrious anchor. Good for you. And we esteem those things in our, Western modern society. And then we say, okay, luckily also practice takes care of the physical wellness and being anchor. If you're not on a team, you're in a PE class maybe, or maybe you do something else like lifting in high school or whatever. But see, as we go out of the intelligent structure that is the institution of schooling in America or in, the Western concept, those anchors start to recede and they don't become mandatory. They become our responsibility to put in place. And then you start to switch and shift the anchors, right? You say, oh, now I'll go hang out with my buddies at the bar and watch the game. Or on Sunday, I go to the bars and watch football on Sundays. And those are different anchors. And those are actually vicious anchors in the long run because they satisfy a short-term need, but they hurt you in the long run. I think it's having the intelligence to be able to say, what are my anchors, right? And it's like for me, that's what my schedule is. It's different anchors throughout the day. And I have what I call free time or unstructured time, but I just want to make sure I hit on the big themes and the big rocks that are important to my well-being and my relational well-being. Like, from 6 to 8 every day is like my wife. I focus and I'm just with my wife. She gets off work. We either do something, activity together. We have dinner. I make dinner, something. But 6 to 8 for 2 hours dedicated to her. And she can be tired or have a meeting or something and, doesn't use it that day, but that's okay. Like she has that every work week, for 6 to 8. Or another anchor is I try to call all my friends once every 2 weeks. So call Danny Mackey, call Mike Smith, try to just call Steve, even though he ignores me all the time. Like call Brad, his co-author and my buddy, like call Mario Ferrelli, like, these guys are just my friends and I just want to talk to them and they're my anchors. And, I might only hit 1 or 2 of them because we're all busy, but I realize like 10 minutes of talking to Mike, and we rarely talk about coaching. We just talk about things, it just leaves us feeling a lot better for the week ahead, and I think that's the key thing, is understanding the need for these structural anchors, but also the multi-dimensional anchors. And you have to identify those. Like, and I put it down very crisply as, you know, the things that give are my well-being anchors, right? So well-being, and you can define that in multiple buckets, right? Intellectual, emotional, physical, spiritual, etc. And then you have your relational anchors. So that might be how you relate to like colleagues at work, or if you're a coach, athletes you work with, or assistant coaches, or the head coach if you're an assistant, or people in your athletic department, or what have you. It's your friends, current friends, past friends. It's your family. I mean, again, it's people who are in a study group with you, or in your running club, whatever. And then you have your duty anchors. Like, I gotta show up and get this done. I have to get this done because people are counting on me to get it done. And fulfilling that. For most people, it's their job, or household chores is another thing. And again, you can take that and put that in a lot of different buckets. And those are kind of the big three that I feel like if you can hit on one of those every day, that will help you from not being burnt out. Because with burnout, like Steve said, it's not about working too much. It's about not restoring enough, right? It's the principle of under recovery, under restoration. We have a high capacity work. I mean, look at people who do, the Comrades Marathon. Look at the people who do, the Leadville 100. People do that, but they don't do it every day. But they do it and they prepare for it. But afterwards, like one of the former athletes I worked with, or one of the athletes I worked with at Portland State, she's now like a badass ultra runner. And I'm just amazed at what Camellia can do. And I'm just like, this is insane. Like, oh, it's a short race. I go, what? 50K. I go, Jesus. I'm just like, it's just, the currency is beyond my context. But for her, it's not a big deal. Oh, yeah, it's whatever. She actually finds running 50Ks very restorative, and racing that distance restorative. 100-mile races are tough. Marathons are tough. But for her, it's a restorative practice. And I think I'd be remiss if, I didn't say that self-reflection and identification of what your restorative anchors are. Those need to be always first. Because if you're not rested and ready to go, and you're telling your athletes to recover and, get ready for the next workout or race, you're being a total hypocrite. But it's something we all struggle with because we are pushers, as athletes and coaches, and we're passionate. And it's a paradox, isn't it, Steve?
If you want to learn more about that, then you can go off and read the book, The Passion Paradox. But in all honesty, like that is part of the book, is that, if you're a pusher, like you have this tendency to have an increased likelihood for burnout, because like passion is like this jet fuel, right? And if you're a pusher, you tend to have a lot of passion. So if like we just let that jet fuel burn, then like we're headed off in whatever direction without actually knowing where we're going or where we're going to end up. So it's really important that you take the time to step back and be like, okay, where am I directing this fuel that I have, and when am I spending this fuel, right? Because it's very easy to just go all in on something, work really hard, and not get much done. I'll give you an example. As Brad and I were going over or comparing our book launch week from our first book together, Peak Performance, to this one, it was very obvious that Peak Performance, we'd get lulls on like launch day or the day after, and we'd be like, oh my gosh, like we have a lull, we have to fill it with doing something. So we'd do something that was completely mindless, didn't sell many books, right? And it could have been, I don't know, could have been something as dumb as like posting random stuff on Reddit. I don't know. But there were all these tasks that we did that didn't, end up in what our number one goal is on launch day, which is selling books so that the message spreads. So this time we were way more intentional on, okay, like let's nail the things that we know or have a good think with a high likelihood sell books. And if we have downtimes, like let's chill out. Like, on launch day, Brad and I were together and in the Bay Area, And we did all this. We woke up at 5 a.m., did all this hard work, blah, blah, blah. And then it got to 10 a.m. and we had like a podcast interview at 12, and we'd already sent all our emails and done all our tweets and all that stuff. And we're like, well, we got 90 minutes to kill. So we went on a hike, right?
Yes. Good.
Which, wouldn't have happened a couple years ago, because we would have been like, oh my gosh, we have to be like all in and sell books right now. Well, if there wasn't anything impactful to do, then why should we drive ourselves nuts doing stuff that doesn't work? So it's like being, again, aware of what actually impacts things.
Right. And then scaling out too, and remembering that your launch day was just another Tuesday to me, and to like most of the other people in the world, right? And so while something might be super important to you, because in your world you've been working hard, it's a culminating thing, it's it's this thing you put all this passion and energy into, for like another 7 billion people, they don't give a shit, and that's okay, because it's not for everybody. So rather than working yourself up in a tizzy and be like, oh, the world's going to end, no, it's not. The world's not going to end if you don't sell 5 books this hour or 500 books this hour. It's just, again, one of the general themes, right, of failure that we always talk about. It's feedback. It says, hey, that's what Steve and Brad did. They've got the feedback of, we did this tactic. It caused us to drain the battery. It didn't work. So we're not going to do that tactic, because what's more important? That we are crisp, clean, and clear. So we have a podcast, and you guys get interviewed for it, and you guys are articulate. You guys are on top of it. You guys are focused. You guys are sharp. You guys are your normal selves, rather than what I like to call like your drained self. Because we all know what our drained self is that person who's didn't sleep enough, hasn't shaved, for guys and women maybe too, like, in a week or two, and is just living on coffee. I mean, it's essentially the symptomatic of a track coach come outdoor NCAA regional, or distance coach come outdoor NCAA regionals, right? I mean, I've been there, just like, oh, my track season almost over. I get a couple weeks and then back to recruiting, but it's sometimes in the position you're in the job, the rhythm is so constant that you have to find these nooks and crannies, to restore. And I won't put you on the spot, Steve, because you're still, in the NCAA coaching environment, and you just have a new book launch, and you have other things I know that are in the kitty here that you're working on other projects. Like, what steps now, crisper, wiser, stronger, are you going to take to circumvent, or at least mitigate the likelihood of burnout come June?
Oh, man. Well, that's a good question, and maybe I should have this all figured out.
Man, if you have a recipe book, you got to eat your own cooking.
Yeah. So. No, I mean, I think most of it is, what I've done is like really set up my schedule and set up my life so that I knew, for instance, I knew I was going to be super stretched thin for this period where it's like launching a book, still going to meets and coaching and all this stuff. Like, I was intentional on that, and I knew it. So, like, I'm in the midst of experience, not burnout, but like coming out of that lull, right? And giving myself time and things to do that like that are restorative to me, like from time spent where I can be in nature, go on walks, read books, etc., spend time with friends, all that good stuff, to at least counterbalance and recharge that, and also time away, like away from my phone. So what I did this time was, in the couple days surrounding launch, I allowed myself to be on Twitter on my phone and stuff like that. But as soon as we got to the end of launch week, like, all that stuff is gone again. So that I'm not like, so that I can like de-escalate almost, and get away from like being in that social media on my phone all the time thing. And then, the other thing is just, putting myself first a little bit on my schedule. Like, I take, again, like our training for my athletes that I coach is set up a little bit different for the college kids, where I trust them to do some stuff on their own, right? So we don't, NCAA allows us to meet 6 days a week. Like, we never, or very rarely, meet 6 days a week in season, because between traveling for meets, competing, practice, workouts, all that stuff, like it can drive me crazy and them crazy. So for instance, this week we have Texas relays Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like for practice, we just met Monday and Tuesday.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we could have met Wednesday because we didn't travel until Thursday, but we didn't because I was like, nope, some of these kids are going to be gone for 3 days. Like they're going to be racing, 2 times or whatever. Like we had a good hard workout on Monday. All they're going to be doing is doing some easy running on Wednesday. Like I need a morning where I can get stuff done and recharge and maybe go to the coffee shop and do some things that I want to do.
Right.
So like we're going to take that Wednesday and you guys get in your run when you need to or whenever you want to. Like don't feel like we got to get up at 6:45 and get it done. And I think making sure those things and times exist are incredibly important, not only for my longevity, but also for my athletes' longevity through this season. I mean, it's a long season. And if we're grinding and like pushing every single step of the way, like we're not going to make it.
No, and I mean, and that's also a good lesson in one, creating self resiliency and self reliance in the athlete, and then also two, not being a helicopter coach or a bulldozer coach, right? And we know now that's a common plight is helicopter or bulldozing parenting and coaching. You don't need to be there for every physical movement that the athlete does. You don't. And if you are, there's something wrong because that means you haven't been teaching or you haven't been empowering them to take self-responsibility and get the job done on their own. And Noah Steve said it's for recovery runs, it's for restorations. There's programs, there's routines, there's rituals set in. This is what we do on these easier days. They're just designed to restore you. Now, he's like, I'm not hands off. If you need some help, I'm around. But it's not like he's like, oh, I'm just a lazy coach. I won't show up to anything or any workouts or anything that's like intense that requires my discerning eye. But I think there is a lot of value in not meeting the maximum in the NCAA world, and those times are for good purposes in place, like those thresholds. And I know like my first year when I was coaching at Portland State, I was trying to recharge or revamp a program and a mindset and a culture, and man, every week was 20 hours on those kids and on me too, and sometimes more, right? And I was getting close to burning myself out, but I felt like I had to do this, be this Hercules and move mountains to kind of get the Portland State distance program to a degree of respectability. But as I got coached longer and as I got more comfortable and as the culture was more sound, the reward was less and less and less. And same deal now, like with the post collegiate and semi pros that I work with, like I try to see them less and less and less. Not because I don't like them or see them in a context where it's like, oh, I'll just go for a run with you, but I won't critique or coach you. Because what I do see them, I want them to be really crisp, really efficient and effective periods of time. So I'm only going to see you 5 hours a week for maybe a workouts and what I call instructional periods, which is one-on-one periods that each athlete has 2 one-on-one periods for an hour a week where, I work with them specifically on liabilities or issues or ancillary things that need development and dedicated focus on just them. And they're the main focus. No one else is at practice. And I found it keeps everything a lot crisper because people know when they have certain work to be done and when they're the focus or when they need to be front and center. And these are adults who are like mortgaging their livelihood and future on, running, going well to a certain degree for the next couple of years. And so, yeah, they're going to be motivated to do it on their own. I don't need to be there, but I'd be remiss if, I didn't call that out and, give you a little shout out because we need that less helicopter coaching. I mean, because it's seeped into our nomenclature. It's seeped into like, being in vogue, and we need to step away from that because it is a symptom that you're really not teaching, that you're just policing.
Yeah, it's one of those things, helicopter coaching, helicopter parenting. it's this need for control, and I get it. Like, I've been in spots where my own coaching where I felt like, oh, I gotta be there every step of the way, and this is
Yeah.
this is my baby. But actually, on that topic, like, this just came into my mind. Like, so Brad has a 1-year-old now. Um,
Yeah.
and it was interesting, like, talking to him about that, and he's like, yeah, the urge to always step in, like, and oh, like, he might tumble while he's walking, or all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and the urge is to always want to step in and save him, right? But you have to fight that urge unless it, like, actually matters, right? If he's gonna crawl off or walk off the bed, sure, step in. But if he's just gonna fall over while he's taking a couple steps on the carpet, then, like, let him take his lumps, because, like,
Right. Yeah.
that's how we learn. So I think it's very similar in the sense of coaching versus running, is that there's certain periods of time where it's incredibly important for you to be there and be on your game, and coach people up and all that stuff. But there's certain periods where you got to trust your athletes to get what they need done,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not like I'm just showing up on the hard workouts only, because I think there's a huge aspect of being there on some easier days and mileage days and all that stuff as well. But it's like being intentional. Okay, when do I need a little break, and when do they need a little break from just seeing everybody?
Mm-hmm.
My athletes. It's funny. I had a couple of my senior girls not too long ago. We had this week where we went, I think, Monday through Friday for some reason, and they were like, "Ooh, like, I miss not having, like, the Wednesday recovery run, like, on our own, where I get to sleep in a little bit." And it's like, it's not any harder because I'm doing the same amount of mileage and all that stuff, but it's almost like you don't have that, like, mental respite to, like, rejuvenate, because you're not on this, like, strict schedule, which I think is
Yeah.
incredibly
It's
important.
graduating the independence, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, I think my to add to what Brad said, which is very astute. I asked my father-in-law, who raised with his wife 5 daughters in their household, and I go, well, how did you not do that? Like, how did you not step in? When you obviously, that's part of being older, stronger, wiser, more seasoned. That they're going to commit an error, and you're watching. It goes, I had two things that calculated every action in my mind. One, will this kill them? And the answer is no, they can continue. Two, will this cost me a lot of money, this error they're about to make? And, and he'd be like, well, yeah, if they fall and break a bone, it's not going to kill them, but it's going to cost me a lot of money because we got to go to the emergency room. Or are they going to crash a car, or crash something because they live on a farm, crash some equipment? And he goes, as long as it didn't kill them and it didn't cost me a lot of money, I let them make the error, because that truly is the only way we learn, right? We learn by doing, and we learn by messing up. And we can sit here and be well intended and try to, like, bulldoze the path and make it, as smooth as possible. But we actually in the long run do people a disservice. And graduating independence is key. And athletes who I've worked with longer, I tell them that. I always tell them, you're a freshman now. You're a sophomore. Like, Eleanor Fulton's a good one. Like, when she was a freshman, I go, nope, I'm God. I don't care. Everything I say is right. You don't know any better. Because it wasn't because she's not smart. It wasn't because she wasn't, didn't have her shit together. It's just, I knew way more about this world than she did. But now she's, like, in her junior, senior year, and, like, she's co-pilot. She calls a lot of the shots just as equally as I do. I'm like, hey, this is your career. Which way do you want to take it? Like, I'm here now more in a supportive role rather than in a driving capacity. Like, I'm actually now in the passenger seat, and you're in the driver's seat. And let's figure out, okay, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? What do you want to do? You call all the shots now, kiddo. But you have to graduate the people into that. And that's a process that takes time, that takes experience, that takes learning, and it's because Steve's seen it. Like, think about how we graduate in the school system, right? Elementary school, middle school, high school, college. It's a steady graduation of more and more and more and more independence, and you're expected to be more independent. Your peer group, you wanting more independence, and you have to figure out, oh, I shouldn't cram for a test because I got an F. Like, or, oh, I shouldn't, like, write that paper last minute, you know, oh, because, like, I didn't get that good a grade. Or or I should probably train over the summer for cross country season because that's going to get me in better condition when we show up, which will then, result in better condition at the championship meets. And you gotta let people make those mistakes and put two and two together. I mean, it's the same with coaching, right, Steve? I mean, I, I'm at a place now, right? We're 10 plus years in our journey, and like, oh my goodness, like the stuff I did when I was year one, year two, I just look back at that, shake my head, and just blush red. But my mentors were sitting there watching me and knowing what I was doing, and they just, yep, he has to learn. He has to do it this way, Otherwise, he won't understand in the long run. And I think that's when you have really good mentors in place, is when they let you coach or do the things you want and the things you think are right in that moment, which are right for you with the limited knowledge you have. Because, but that to them, their experience, but also them being lifelong coaches and teachers, they know that they have to take those actions, live with those consequences, reflect, and then decide to get better from the lack of result or the mediocre result, and then wait for them to come to you. That's a sign of real mastery, and also high intelligence.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's a great place to sum it up, as I have to branch out and go from my podcasting duties to my coaching duties.
The anchors. But you know what? All our listeners have duties themselves. And one duty that we ask of you is to buy Steve's book. Buy the book, buy the book, buy the book. And I know you get tired of me saying it, but it's really important that you support authors, because allowing Steve and Brad to share their work and ideas and buying the book, not just like, like I said, I turned the book, they want to give me a free copy. I said, no, I'll buy it, because it's important to buy books. The more you buy books, the more books stay around. So buy books. And buy Steve's book.
It's true. I mean, I'm saying it's true because I get a small cut, but it's also true. I mean, I do the same thing, as I try and buy the author's books. It's really easy to get free copies after you write, and people want you to promote stuff. But I think it's important because books are, I think it was Ryan Holiday who said that, like, I will never have a budget for books. Books are the one thing that I allow myself to buy without thinking about price ever, because you never know what idea you're going to read that actually changes and impacts your life to a very significant degree. And I'm sure we all can think of books that we read and we said, oh my gosh, like this has changed how I think about something, and I think there's nothing more valuable. I don't know if the Passion Paradox will be that for you, but I can guarantee you that there will be tidbits that you get out of it that are useful, not only in this context and burnout, but also in other aspects of your life, because I have no doubt if you're listening to this podcast, you're also likely pushers like John and I.
Yes, no, without doubt. And I helped give them some references and some books they used to help write the Passion. So some of the stuff I already knew, but I was like, you know what? They came up and found and intersected and created, all these golden nuggets where I was like, whoa, that's awesome. But I didn't know about Ryan Holiday, Steve, because I have the same exact policy. Like the idea or the formulation of awareness and knowledge and expediency of thought you get from reading, it is, and reading good books and books that make you think, it is a screaming bargain, a total screaming bargain. I have no budget either. Like I've bought $500 books. I bought 5-cent books. It doesn't matter how much the book is. What matters is the value that you get from the ideas in that book. I mean, I have a $3,500 book I want to, buy here, and I'm saving my pennies. It's Henry Miller's On Turning 80. There's only 300 some copies in the world, and they're not easy to get. But I mean, Henry Miller is a great author of Tropic of Cancer, and those books were a guy who reflects on 80 years of living, who was really crisp and curious. Man, that's invaluable wisdom. So pick up the Passion Paradox, because there's invaluable wisdom there. And also visit the new and better High Performance West. It's a slow rollout, not getting burnt out this year, but it's going to be good stuff. And the good stuff is going to be just coming in at a little slow trickle hill here for a little while, and then, it'll pick up. But check it out. It's streamlined, much more minimalist, simple design. Hope you guys like it.